Hello everyone, I'm very glad that you listened to my story. Please give me a follow and like the video if you enjoyed it. Feel free to comment and provide feedback so I can improve the sound quality. Yes, I will now continue the unfinished story. Chapter 41 Screams of Terror. Later, that day, when Solus returned with the identity of the culprit, a sample of the poison and the hilarious new gossip as prizes, she had expected Lith to be excited or at least relieved. Instead he was brooding, with the same annoyed face he had when he was forced to spend quality time with Tryon. Why so gloomy? We did it, we can take her out anytime we want. Smile a little. I would indeed smile if we managed to find her at the first or maybe fifth attempt. Unless math has become an opinion, the last time I slept, searching 13 rooms out of 18, means you have searched 39 persons, more than 2/3 of the staff members. At this point we can as well sweep the remaining 5 to verify if she has accomplices. Not to mention that this maid wasn't even on my list, the psycho wife would have bested me if not for your new ability. Lith started pacing, his mind analyzing the choices at his hand. You are a real party pooper, you know. Solus pouted. Sorry, you did a great job, but put yourself in my shoes. First, it took us so long to find her that I am pretty sure the Countess has already noticed that something is wrong. The Count and his heirs have been poisoned daily, yet they are perfectly fine. It's safe to assume that soon she will resort to a more direct approach. We need to move fast, before her pawn flees from the scene. Second and most important, this new piece of gossip you brought me is a nightmare. Sure, is all fun and laugh, until you realize that if the rumor reaches the Countess' ears, she may even believe it. And while I don't care being a target, the same can't be said about my mother. We must wrap this up quickly, and try to get as much evidence as we can, so whoever is handling the annulment process will be forced to speed his bureaucrat *s up. Then, I can ask the Count to bring my family here as soon as possible. When those blabbering fools see that I am the spitting image of my father, that stupid rumor will die out. Only then I will be able to focus on protecting the Count again. Well, yeah. Solus shrugged. But you are forgetting about the bright side? If the Countess falls for this rumor, she will get really angry. And when she's angry she makes really stupid mistakes. Always such a pessimist. And you even dare to question why you look like Cr*P in a mirror. Ever since Solus had started following the suspects, Lith hadn't been sitting idly either. To make use of whatever she would find, he needed a plausible excuse. At random times during the day, he would pretend to go investigating on his own, leaving the 3 nobles with the guards, while he would actually always remain in the vicinity, ready to intervene if necessity arose. Also, he had asked the Count to give him a tour of his magical library, getting the opportunity to borrow some Tier 4 books and store them inside Soluspedia. Even when they were apart, Lith could still access both the dimensional storages, it would just take some effort to operate them. That allowed him to further expand his knowledge about the possibilities of magic, and gave him several new ideas. The next day, after Solus identified at least one of the Countess agents, Lith started to prepare the final steps for his new plan, while Solus searched the remaining 7 rooms. It turned out they miscalculated, since both the butler and the head of kitchen had their private rooms, because of their status and seniority. Her task was made faster and easier by the fact that she had not to tail a target for a whole day anymore. Solus could just get inside and search for evidence as soon the coast was clear. On Lith's side things were a bit trickier. First, he had to identify the poison from the sample Solus brought back. It was a colorless and odorless liquid. He spreaded a small drop of it on his finger and another on his tongue, without swallowing it. It tasted sweet and acidic at the same time. What the f***ck? A pineapple pizza flavored poison? This is disgusting. And here I hope to have left that Cr*P on Earth. While his stomach was turning at those horrible memories, the areas where he had spreaded the poison became numb. After a while they became red and swollen. Since breathing was getting harder, Lith immediately neutralized the poison, before looking for it in the Count's books he had stored in Solaspedia. Thankfully, in this world they shouldn't have synthetic poisons outside the magical varieties. It shouldn't be hard to find the right one. It turned out to be an extract from a rare type of blackberries-like fruit that usually grew in marshlands. The whiteberries, more commonly known as doom berries, in their natural state simply had a sweet smell and disgusting taste, but their juice if properly distilled and condensed was highly toxic. Its low dosage symptoms matched the Count's story, like the effects Lith had experienced fitted the description of its concentrated form. At that point, the final issue lied in finding a way to get a full confession without destroying the good image Count Lark had of him. Lith didn't miss how disgusted the Count had reacted at the mention of tortures. Lith had no interest in arts, but from the way the Count had painted him, it was clear that in his mind the young Magico was valiant and righteous, rather than a cold-blooded schemer with a penchant for inflicting pain. This is so stupid. Not only I have to save him, but I also have to do it in a way of his liking. Having a good man as a backer is both a blessing and a curse. I need to get creative. Having almost run out of options, Lith needed check out books he had never thought could have any use to him, before going to the Count and explain to him the only plan crazy enough to have a ghost of a chance. A few days later, Lina Crestwick was at her rope's end. The Countess was sick and tired of her failures, and had clearly told her to either get the job done or start running for her life. That ungrateful B*TCH. After so many years of loyal service, always covering her sorry A*S, even volunteering to get rid of her deadbeat husband, that's how she repays me? Now I get why the sod wants to get rid of her. I'll make a last attempt before getting out of here. I'm sick of being caught between a rock and a hard place, always watching my back. If even this fails, I'll escape to the Gorgon's empire. I should be safe there. She had no idea what could have possibly go wrong. Before getting fired, Genon had told her that the Doomberry kiss was a powerful poison that even he would have a hard time to detoxify. Could the Count have an inhuman constitution despite being so thin? During her shift in the kitchen, she waited for the plates to be left unattended before adding 2 spoonsful of poison into the Count's plate. It was impossible to miss, since even the napkins had the initials embroidered. That dose would be enough to kill a dozen men, but she was tired of slowly rising the amount, day after day, waiting for something to happen. Some hours later, she finally succeeded. After eating the soup, the Count had started to have difficulty breathing, his tongue swelling like a sponge. Both the so-called magician Brat and Pontus, which back in the military had been a field medic, couldn't help him. The B***** was finally dead. Lina, just like her co-workers, started sobbing uncontrollably. But while they were grieving, she was weeping with joy. Now she was safe, and with the sum she had agreed with the Countess, she could finally turn her lifelong dream into reality. She didn't need any more to work her A**s for someone else, it was her turn to live in a beautiful house, surrounded by servants. Of course, first she had to wait for the investigation to be concluded. Jaden, the new Count, imposed the martial law, prohibiting anyone to go out of the house without his permission. Lina had nothing to fear, thought. As soon as she spiced up the late Count's plate, she had thrown away the remaining poison and carefully washed the flask, before putting it back in the kitchen pantry. During the rest of the day, every room was combed and every member of the staff had to undergo a long interrogation. When they finally let her walk, she was exhausted, all the stress and emotions had taken a big toll on her. Also, she was starting to realize that she had actually killed a man, and a good one too. She tried to ease her guilty conscience by thinking of her future wealth and happiness, but instead she ended up second thinking everything she did so far. What if that B***TCH breaks her word? Is not like I can expose her crime, after all. Even worse, what if my reward turns out to be a knife in the back or a poisoned drink? She doesn't need me anymore, I'm just a loose end. Good gods, what have I done? Have I really killed a harmless buffoon, just for pile of gold? The words pile and gold still had a soothing effect on her, so she decided to go to bed and put all that story behind her. What's done it's done, all the remorse in the world can't bring back the Count, may the gods rest his soul. The problem was that her roommates wouldn't stop talking about what happened. It was the first time in years that a murder occurred within those walls. After some yelling and bickering, she managed to convince them to close the curtains and turn off the oil lamp. Lina had just closed her eyes when the doorknob started turning and rattling. Someone was trying to get in. As soon as the light was lit again, the rattling stopped. What was that? It must be another of Sika's stupid pranks. She's such an hole. And how could she do it if all our rooms are closed from the outside? Martial law, remember. Lina pointed out. When they were still trying to find an explanation, suddenly the room became so cold that they could see their breaths condensing. Their room's window got all fogged up. One of her roommates became really scared, banging on the door and calling for help, but no one answered. All they could do was to wear their heaviest clothes and cover themselves with the blankets. Then, the oil lamp went out. No matter how hard they tried, it was impossible to lit it again. Panic started to ensue when the knob rattled again, even stronger than before, while their beds shook like during a quake. It's like in the old stories my grandmother used to tell me when I was little, screamed one of the maids. A vengeful spirit is trying to get in. Grow up, Syria. There are no such things as ghosts. Lina was a woman of action, she never believed to folk tales. She raised her nightstand, to use it to smash the window that refused to open, when she saw him. The late Count Triquil Lark was in front of her, despite her room being on the first floor. His whole figure was pale white, glowing in a dim light like a firefly. His eyes were all white with no pupils, shedding tears of blood. Small blue flames were erupting from his snow-white hair, dancing around him while emitting screams of pain. Their eyes were locked. Lina couldn't look away, her whole body frozen stiff, the nightstand still raised. How could you do this to me? The Count's voice sounded distorted and distant, barely a whisper, but they could hear it clearly as a shout. Screaming in terror, the three women ran to the door, trying to open it and calling for help. When they looked back, the Count was already floating inside, despite the window being still locked. When he extended his hand, they felt a jolt running through their spines, falling into a cold oblivion. Chapter 42 No Rest for the Wicked. When Lina woke up, she discovered she wasn't in her bedroom anymore. The moon was covered by clouds, and with only the dim light of the stars, she couldn't figure out her new location. Lina only knew she was now in the open. The cold night breeze and the rough feeling of the earth under her hands left no space for doubts. As her eyes started to adjust to the penumbra, she noticed some humanoid forms laying on the ground, only a few meters away. Glad of not being alone, she slowly crawled towards them, while trying to remember what had just happened. Lina was about to shake her roommates, when the moon shined through the moving clouds, revealing them to be skeletons. Lina started to scream, and when she recognized the nightgowns they were wearing as those she had seen countless times on her friends, it turned into a shriek. Around her, multiple figures started to move and moan. She tried to run away, but tripped into something soft and squishy, tumbling on the ground. When she opened her eyes again, she was staring at a tombstone where was engraved, "Here lies Croblin Lark, beloved father and husband." Lina suddenly realized what was that place, why it did feel so familiar. That was Lark's family burial ground, where all the forefathers of Count Lark lied in their eternal rest. In that moment, she remembered everything, the poisoning, the twisting knob, the ghost. She wanted to believe it was all a bad dream, but her foot still hurt after the fall. Lina was about to lose her mind, when the moonlight revealed that the moving figures weren't undead, but other members of the staff she knew all too well. Two of them were actually her accomplices, Zaman, the second oldest butler after Poultice, whose loyalty actually lied only with the Countess, and Basia, a young maid that had been planted a couple years ago to keep an eye on the Count's private quarters. The three of them had been tasked by the Countess to ensure her return to power, by eliminating all possible obstacles. It was only thanks to Zaman's and Basia's help that she had been able to slip the poison in the food unnoticed, even when she wasn't supposed to be in the kitchen. Either by relying on Zaman's authority or Basia's flirting charm, she had managed to complete every task assigned to her after the Countess' forced departure. There were also two more staff members with them. Rifia, a young valet she had often worked with, and Amand, one of the many butlers of the household. Lina, is that you? Basia looked confused, shaking her head, trying to regain her focus. That scream of yours almost made my head explode. Where in the God's name are we? Why, I'm not in my room. I clearly recall. Zaman's voice was cut short, the blood draining from his visage as he remembered the last events. The Count! He exclaimed. At those words, all five of them froze up in place, swept away by the terror caused by the unnatural encounter. The Count is back. Rifia said with a choked voice. And the gods know why, but he believes I'm responsible for his death. Soon they all started looking around, finding the corpses of their roommates. Their clothes were unscathed, while their bodies seemed to have aged centuries. Rorik, why did this happen to you? Amand fell to his knees, near the remnants of his oldest friend, crying desperately. Shut up, you fool. Zaman forced his mouth shut with a hand. In case you haven't noticed, we are in a cemetery. Is better not to wake which can eternal lie. Zaman didn't dare emit more than a whisper, he was very superstitious. Usually Lina would mock him for his cowardice, but that night was different. She could feel her guts twisting and turning in fear, her body begging her to run away. Suddenly the ground trembled, and a raging fire erupted from an open grave. Count Striquillark grave. How could you do this to me? The Count's spirit slowly emerged from the flames. Prepare to be judged by my ancestors. From the tombs nearby the Count, three skeletons arose, unearthing themselves up to the waist. Murderers! Wailed an old man's voice. Traitors! Yelled a woman's voice. Vermin! Said a man's voice. The three skeletons were struggling to get free from Earth's embrace, while announcing their verdict. The dirt, tattered clothes they wore kept ripping apart. The die is cast. The Count's spirit said with an otherworldly deep voice. Confess. He was pointing his finger towards Rifia, who suddenly felt pushed down on the ground by an invisible force. I'm innocent. I swear. He said, sobbing uncontrollably. The three skeletons started to wail as one, in a cacophony of indistinguishable voices. Their hollow orbits emitted a red glow, like a candle had been lit within, and like the Count, blood tears started to endlessly flow along their cheekbones. Liar! The Count yelled, and Rifia was dragged by the invisible force towards the Count's open grave, whose flames started to rise and roar loudly. The others tried to hold him by the arms, but the spirit's pull was too strong. When Rifia was thrown into the fiery pit, he emitted an inhumane shriek while the flames turned from bright red to an ominous purple. He will serve me in the netherworld, to atone for his sin. The Count's spirit said. Confess. This time he was pointing at Amand, who promptly complied. I confess. I confess. It was me stealing the silk bolts, exploiting my inventory duty. That's why there was never enough. And how do you atone? Said the spirit, its eyes reduced to two flaming slits. I'm so sorry. I swear. Words are not enough. The corpses on the ground arose, their orbits brimming with a red light. They lifted Amund with their skeletal hands over their heads, and threw him into the pit. "Rorik, why?" was his final scream before disappearing in the flames. Before the ghost could pass his judgment, Lina kneeled deeply, head on the ground, begging for forgiveness. "I confess. It was me poisoning you, and those two are my accomplices," she said, pointing at the two survivors. Zaman and Baizia tried to take a step back, but the skeletons had returned, surrounding them again. "Because of you my children are alone in this world," the ghost wailed in pain. "It's only a matter of time before they join me in death. How do you atone?" "I'm so sorry. I've been stupid, I have no proof. I threw away the poison and burned all her ladyship's letters." "Then burn yourself." Lina was then dragged by her dead roommates in the pit, only the flames put an end to her shrieks. Zaman and Baizia kneeled too, going straight to the point. "I can save your children," yelled the young maid. "I'm not stupid, I never trusted that B*tch as far as I can throw her. I kept all her letters, her orders, in case she broke her word. I keep them all under a loose board in the kitchen's pantry. As did I. Also, I know where she keeps hidden all her personal correspondence." The old butler rushed to add, fearing of becoming useless to his captor. "She ordered the poison months ago. And there's so much more to it. It's all in a secret compartment right under her bed. I swear, that's all that I know. Please have mercy of this old fool." "Magnificent," said the Count with his usual joyful and enthusiastic tone, clapping his hands in delight. Suddenly he didn't sound otherworldly at all. The skeletons fell down like puppets whose strings had been cut, the fire went out and the Count came down to the ground with a thump loud enough to be heard. Was this all? Zaman couldn't believe his eyes. A farce. Poultice completed the sentence for him. "Yes, old weasel. I knew you were always up to no good." The traitorous servants were able to put a face to the old skeleton's voice. "Jaden, Kayla, be a dear and go retrieve the evidence. At this point I can't trust anyone else." The Count's heirs came right after Poultice, nodding, before running back to the house. Knowing he was doomed, Zaman still found the strength to watch into the open grave, finding out that everyone was still alive, just bound and gagged by tendrils of earth. Thinking about what would befall to him and his family, the old butler was filled with regret. The long years of loyal service, the savings of a lifetime, all those careful plans for his retirements, shattered together with his hopes for a better tomorrow for his sons. Lith sighed with relief, he could finally come out in the open. If he could, he would pat his back by himself. The results had far exceeded his expectations. Since Solus couldn't find anything in the remaining rooms, Lith had her follow Lina day and night, taking note of all those she was the most in contact with, to round them up all together for the final act. Which, by the way, had been quite a hassle to arrange. To avoid blowing his cover, Lith could only resort to chore magic and spells up to tier 3, like the hoovering spell he had applied to the Count. He had explained everything in detail to the Count, to avoid him being scared or surprised by the special effects he had in mind. Lith, of course, said he would move the skeletons with air magic, while he was actually using spirit magic. The blood tears trick was an easy one, chicken blood that he prevented to clot with light magic, while using water magic to make it go down the cheekbones, pass behind the ear and through the hair to get an endless stream effect. The single steps were easy, but keeping all those spells active at the same time, manipulating flames, blood, skeletons, had been quite exhausting, even with Solus's help. She had taken care of half the stage, but the mana she used was Lith's. They were like two divers with a single oxygen tank. The Count too was very happy with the result. Ah! 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 I always knew that magic is awesome. Flying has been such a memorable experience. Not to mention their faces. Count Lark was laughing like a kid after a successful prank. You should have seen their faces. Priceless. I never had so much fun in my life. He patted Litha's shoulder, covering him in white powder. Who would have guessed that old ghost stories from my books could be so effective? With a little tuning here and there, of course. For being a goody-goody two-shoes, the Count is quite a trickster. Lith thought. Despite being so averse to torture, he had no qualms scaring so many people ***. Guess he never heard about psychological torture and PTSD. As soon as they got their hands on the incriminating evidence, Count Lark immediately used his communication amulet to contact the King's Bureau of Law and Order to submit them. The night clerk assured him that they would move his paperwork on the top of the list, and that they would send royal investigators to shed light on the case. Translated from the bureaucratic lingo, it meant that the Count's case would now take days instead of weeks. Lith wouldn't take any risks, not after showing so much of his prowess, so he had the Count make his whole family come to the estate the very next day. He sent them also some clothes he had prepared beforehand. In such a palace, the lowest stable boy was better dressed than them, even if they wore their best suits. When they arrived, one way or another, all the staff was assembled to see firsthand the mysterious woman who had spawned the Count's alleged fifth son. They expressed much admiration for his mother's and sister's beauty, and even Raz received a lot of attentions. When Lith sent Solus to check if the rumor had finally died out, she replied with endless laughing out loud and an unbelievable story. According to her report, the household was now split into two factions. The first one, that she dubbed #TeamLith, was led by Poultice, which refused to step back from his initial theory. Who would have thought that such an airhead like the Count could also be such a schemer? Not only he got himself such a beautiful and young mistress, he also had the smarts to choose a woman whose husband resembles him so much that he would never suspect the son isn't his own. That witch of the Countess can't hold a candle to such gorgeous woman. The second one, #Team Raz, was led by Hulya. She was the head of the kitchen staff, first chef, and also Poultice's oldest rival in terms of both authority and gossip skill. Are you gone senile or what? The Count is too noble and chivalrous to cheat, even on such a treacherous hag. Clearly, he had an affair before their wedding, and Sir Raz is the offspring of that love. That means that not only he is the real Count's fifth son, but that the young mage and his beautiful sisters are all his secret nephews. That's why he cares so much about the boy, and why he has brought them all here now that the Countess is dead set to wipe out the whole bloodline. How noble of him! He probably has protected them from the shadows all these years, to keep them safe from his wife's jealousy and ire. Lith didn't know if to laugh or cry. How the ***ck did we come to this? Sorry. Solus shrugged. It seems that the Count's staff has the hobby of making everything related to nobles look sordid. Thinking ill of something makes even coincidences looks interesting, don't you think? Lith shook his head in desperation. Poor mom. She is just a forbidden love triangle away from becoming the main character of one of those chick flicks that were all the rage a few years ago on Earth. Chapter 43 Burying the Hatch. Aside from the gossip, life in the Count's private quarters was really peaceful. Count Lark took the initiative to explain everything to Litha's parents, taking the blame entirely on himself, and giving only words of praise to their son. Raz and Alina were actually quite angry, and wanted to give Lith a solid piece of their mind. But after the Count apologized, even bowing to them, they were too embarrassed and flattered to say anything, at least in front of him. The whole family could not stop staring at the house. Walls made of stone, the luxurious furniture, the carpets. Everything seemed to come out straight from a fairy tale. Until that day, they had always thought they would never see such riches. Lith started to wonder how long would it take for them to come back down to earth, when breakfast arrived. The delicious and sweet smell of the pastries immediately caught their attention. Just great. Lith sighed inwardly. I could expect my family's reaction to the Count's house, and luckily outhosts are overlooking their quite rude behavior. My only hope is that they don't jump on the food like starving wolves. That would be too embarrassing. Party pooper. Let them be happy, so maybe they'll beat your A*s less when you get back home. Solus rebuked. Point taken. As soon as the cart entered the room, Litha's family mimicked their host's behavior, politely sitting around the table in an ordered manner, waiting to be served. That was also the first time someone outside the family was treating them with such care. The girls couldn't stop giggling. What the F***ck? Lith was fairly surprised. It wasn't a maid pushing the cart full of delicacies, it was Halia herself, accompanied by some kitchen personnel that Solus identified as her posse. It was the first time that Lith saw her in the flesh, and soon he understood why. Halia personally served the Count's family and then his own, showering everyone with compliments and attentions. Her followers did the same, but with more tact and less enthusiasm. When they left, there was enough food on the table to feed a battalion. Hashtag Team Raz rules, B***TCH. Solus screamed. Count Lark was both embarrassed and flabbergasted. Halia barely served him on his birthday, and he had no idea why his usually impeccable staff had taken such liberties with his esteemed guests. Lith signaled him that he would explain later, before stopping everyone in their tracks, preventing them to take even a single bite. Usually that would have garnered him a lot of nasty words, but in front of their host they had to shut up and listen. The mention of the past poisoning attempts made them inwardly perform a 180 degrees turn, going from demanding revenge to gratefulness in just a few words. Lith wasn't willing to let his guard down, he kept checking every single plate and forcing them to drink only conjured water. It was really depressing for his family, since he was the only one having tasted hot chocolate back on Earth, but they soldiered up. In the following days, the forced cohabitation would have been much more awkward, if the Count's private quarters had not been bigger than their house. The women, led by Kayla, took for themselves the bedroom, the biggest and most comfortable room, while the men had to settle up for the anteroom and its soft sofas. There were no more assassination attempts, since all the gathered evidence had caused a fuss for the Countess, and by remaining stubbornly holed up in the best guarded and easily defensible part of the house, the Count left her with no openings. Koya Lark had looked in every nook and cranny, searching for leverage, but the Count had no weakness she could exploit, and that nasty Magico kid was even worse. After a thorough background check, she discovered he had no friends and no family outside those he had brought with himself. Killing or kidnapping his lost brother, Orpal, could be considered making him a favor at best. The only person remaining was Neria/Nana, his mentor, but that was suicide. If the kid was so powerful, what were the limits of that old hag prowess? The Countess could only curse herself for always ignoring his husband's hobbies. She had no idea who she was, or what repercussions messing with her could have. She knew nothing about magic, except what her cousin, Jenon, said to her in the past. And even then, she had only pretended to listen to him most of the times. She decided to keep that as a last resort, if everything else failed. Meanwhile, Litha's family was quickly getting accustomed to living in such a splendid manner, wearing only beautiful clothes and eating delicious food. Aside from the random scare caused by a guard sneeze or an animal in the garden, life had turned into a fairy tale for them. Lith, instead, was quite annoyed. Since the first day, the Count, Kayla, and Jaden had showered with praises Alina, Rena and Tista for their perfect skin and luscious hair. "I'm so envious of you, girls. I wish I could get rid of these things on my face." Kayla sighed. Over time the camaraderie between the young ladies had grown strong. "Yeah, you are already so pretty. If only." Tista threw Lith a meaningful look, that he pretended not to notice. Jaden's interest toward Rena was embarrassingly obvious, and while he tried looking at her stealthily, such attention in turn got him as many stone-cold glares from Lith. "I get that he is just 20 and horny as a boar, but she is just 14. Back where I came from that's bad. Plus, Unless he wants to marry her, I'd rather neuter him. I won't allow him to ruin her future, treating her like a fling. Over my dead body. Rena was flattered by both the young man's attentions and his little brother care. Yet she was just dazzled by the house, not stupid. Alina had warned her many times about the young men, nobles or not, that would try to take advantage of naive young girls. She would accept compliments, but refuse any improper gift and avoided remaining alone with him. When Kayla and the Count noticed that if Litha's glares could maim, Jaden could easily fit into an envelope, they had a private talk with him. After that the air in the room became a lot lighter. Finally, the Count received the notification via the communication amulet that the annulment was finally done. He was once again a free man. After confirming that Koya had been notified too, hence she had no more reason to plot against him, he could finally relax and step out of his room for the first time since weeding out the traitors. The first thing he and Lith did was to contact Nana to explain her everything. "That's why you were so serious?" she pondered. "And why you took away my only helper? Lark, when we meet again, we have to talk about compensation. My business suffered because of your family squabble," she nagged. There, Lady Neria. It was a matter of life and death, and the young Lith proved to be decisive in solving the matter. Sorry, but I have to go. I have a business to attend. We'll talk later, especially with you, young imp. This lack of trust wounds my old heart," she said, trying to act all old and frail. Lith bowed and asked for her forgiveness, but his thoughts were quite different. "Do you even have a heart? I'd bet all I have that the only reason you are pouting is that you have missed such juicy gossip for so long." Contrary to their expectations, Nana called only a few hours later, and their next conversation had an entirely different mood. Nana was laughing her ass off the entire time, managing to speak only briefly while gasping for air. Ah! 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 You can't believe what just happened to me. Someone just tried to kidnap me. I'm serious." A long laughing pause followed. "It made me feel young again, like when I was still an adventurer. Guys dressed in tacky full black clothes, coming at me from all directions, it was hilarious. You should have seen their faces when I took them down at once with a corona discharge." According to the Count's books, it was a very strong Tier 5 lightning spell. Nana's true specialty was air magic, after all. Lith had no idea what it was exactly. It was mentioned, but not described. He had already enough troubles understanding Tier 4 spells. They were on a league of their own compared to the magic he had previously learned. They were so cute. They even had some minor magical items on them. "I have no use for such trinkets, but I can still sell them for good money." Lith was so envious. Magical items. He had yet to find any. "Hey, that's offensive." Solus pointed. "I resent that. You are not an item, you are a friend." The pure sincerity of that thought sent Solus giggling and blushing in a corner of her mind, away from Litha's perceptions unless he explicitly searched for her. "That makes the three of us even," Nana said. "I hadn't this much fun in decades. I was almost considering to let some of them go and not submit a report to the Mage Association. Almost. So, Lark, this is my annulment gift for you. From now on, you can choose to introduce yourself as bachelor or a widower. I'd go with widower, is more dramatic, chicks dig rich lonely men and makes less awkward explaining why you have 2 children already. Ta-ta." After the communication ended, both the men were shocked to their bones. "You told me that your wife handled stress badly, but this is beyond idiotic." Lith even forgot the most basic etiquette. Indeed. The Count didn't seem to notice. The only explanation is that Koya had arranged Lady Neria's kidnapping in advance, and when she received the news about the annulment, it was too late to call it off. "She is a close friend to both of us. Koya's plan would make sense if Lady Neria wasn't the strongest magician in all the county." Not to mention that even if the plan succeeded, the result would be disastrous anyway. Count Lark sighed. Koya, you never listened to me when I talked about magic and its rules. I hope they don't make you suffer too much. You are still the mother of my kids. Thinking about the destruction that was about to befall the whole Gishel household, including his disowned children, he could not avoid shedding tears of regret and compassion. Lith moved behind him, patting his back while using his sheer willpower to suppress a hysterical laughter. Lith and his family spent 2 more weeks as the Count's guests, fully enjoying his hospitality and the beauty of the whole manor, especially the park. Now everyone had a room of his own, there was no danger anymore. That meant that away from prying eyes, Rena and Tista could freely mock their little brother for the Count's painting and the heroic aura he had depicted him with. Living every day with Lith, they really couldn't see him as someone great or overbearing. He was always their little brother. Lith paid them no mind, their laughter was something he had fought so hard to protect. As long that they laughed happily with him, instead of him, sibling mockery was perfectly acceptable. Alina and Raz, instead, were really scared by the stuffed BYK, considering that their son had been reckless enough to face such beast on his own. When they would get back home, they would give him a talk, but not now. There was no point in spoiling their first vacation in over 30 years. For farmers, vacations were just myths, like dragons. Lith used that time to get acquainted with the huge magic library the Count had assembled over the years, finally discovering what blood resonance magic was. It was a recently discovered branch of light magic, and by using it a mage could ascertain if 2 people were blood related or even to whom a blood sample belonged. Interesting, back on Earth this could become the foundations for forensics analysis. Seems that this mage, Duke Marth, and name, not title, is still alive and well, teaching magic in the White Griffin Academy. This makes 2 famous mages residing there. Maybe Nana went to the Lightning Griffin because of her air magic prowess, while the White Griffin specializes in light magic. Or maybe is just a coincidence, whatever. It's too far from here for me. Returning home revealed to be a bit traumatic for his family. No more servants, no more slacking off, no more all-you-can-eat buffet 24/7. It took many days and even more sighs, but soon they returned to their old routine. The Count's sharecroppers had done an excellent job, they even repaired and reinforced the house, making it seem brand new. The Count had also sent them home with lots of gifts. All the clothes that had been prepared for them, a lot of makeup from Kayla, and a whole crate of food from Hulya. The cook was really fond of the family, and couldn't wait to have them back in the manor. A night, Lith was training his martial arts together with Solus, when she felt an unknown Monocore approaching. More curious than worried, he made her return to his finger and set up various layers of protection around the house. Whoever he was alone and not very sneaky. Now that he had stopped practicing, Lith could hear him getting closer. The nightbirds and insects had gone silent. "Who the heck are you?" Lith asked as soon as their eyes met. The man in front of him wore an expensive robe, worthy of a magician in Dungeons and Looting, but now was all dirty and ripped in many points. He was unshaven, his hair was muddy too, and with only moonlight Lith couldn't discern its color from the dirt. "You." The man had a pleasantly surprised expression on his face. "You have finally returned. I have waited for weeks, sleeping in the mud and eating only acorns and berries, but it was worth the wait. I'll ask you only one more time, who are you?" Lith yawned, the man was not making any sense. "I'm Jenon Gishel. You killed my entire family. Prepare to die." Lith reacted by laughing his *s off. "Oh. I get it now. Bravo on surviving despite belonging to a family of brain-dead idiots. How dare you? I'll kill your whole family, like you killed mine." Lith started laughing even harder. "You? With your pathetic yellow monocore? Even my little sister is stronger than you." Litha's words and countenance made no sense to Jenon. Outraged by such lack of respect and fear, completely different from how he had imagined the face-off, while enduring all the hardships, Genon started casting a lightning spell. Lith responded by bringing his index finger on the lips, whispering, "Hush! We don't want to wake up the neighbors." A second air dome, beside the one that Lith had previously set up, enveloping the whole house, surrounded the two men, covering a 30-meter, 33 yards, radius. Breza Inidra. Genon completed his spell, a bolt of lightning shot toward Lith, which was still laughing. "Look up," he said, pointing to the sky, and like an obedient dog, the bolt turned 90 degrees up, rising harmlessly in the air before dissipating. "Seriously? A Tier 2 spell? How the heck did you manage to graduate from whatever backwater academy they sent you?" Genon suddenly felt scared. What he had just saw made absolutely no sense. Not even his teachers had ever done something like that. "You know, I am really stressed." Lith stopped laughing, his tone turning cold and detached, like he was talking to himself rather than to his opponent. "I have spent weeks holed up, pretending to be weak and harmless. Playing the good F***ing kid role. But now I can finally be myself." For the first time since he had achieved the Cyan Monocore, Lith went all out. His body released a brilliant cyan aura, filled with killing intent. His bones and muscles started to pop and creak, moving to accommodate that sudden surge of power. His eyes glowed like torches, emitting an ice-blue radiance while his smile went to ear. His teeth shined like fangs in the full moonlight. Genon was scared but not frozen, starting to cast a Tier 3 fireball, the strongest spell he could cast safely without risking it to backfire. Lith stood there, tilting his head left and right, waiting for him to finish. The fireball was a 5 meters, 5.5 yards, radius sphere of raging flames, but the closer it came to Lith, the more it shrank, until it became the size of the marble, allowing Lith to catch it with his open palm and squeezing it out with a puff. "Tisk, tisk. You can use everything but fire magic. The noise isn't a problem, but the light could alert someone, and we don't want that." Genon had no idea what was happening, but he knew that remaining there was too dangerous. That wasn't a magico, but a monster. He tried to run away, but before he could get out the hush zone, Lith was already pinning him down. "First you threaten my family and now you want to leave? That's rude. The night is still young, and I have so many things to experiment on you, yet. Let's play." Despite the protective barrier, deep in the Tron woods, the king in the east, could feel the magic turbulence growing stronger. "Take heed, my pack. Some human has threatened Scourge's cubs. Let's learn from his mistakes and pray together for his soul, so in his next life he will be wiser for this." The entire woods resounded with howls until dawn came. Chapter 44 Challenging Times. The next day, Lith was happy and relaxed. He kept humming the whole time while he cleaned the house and prepared breakfast, reheating the pastries to make them regain some of their fragrance. The long permanence in the Count's manor had proved to him how stressful it was being constantly forced to hide his skill and powers. Being born in a backwater village, where no one knew jack about magic, was a blessing in disguise. He had got too used to the freedom and isolation living in a farmhouse guaranteed him, to the point that holding back and constantly pretending to use fake magic for a prolonged period was akin to torture for him. After a long discussion with Solus about the problem, they decided that the best course of action was to find a way to not attend any magic academy. According to the magic annuals he had read in the last weeks, it was possible to become a member of the Magic Association despite being homeschooled. It just required a longer and more difficult exam session. The biggest difference between a homeschooled and a Magic Academy graduate amounted only in a matter of fame and prestige. By being admitted and successfully passing the tests devised by famous and talented magicians, the student was bound to have an easier time whatever was the path of his choosing. A homeschooled, instead, no matter the score he could achieve, would always be seen like a rogue magician with no references. He would first need to prove himself, by either performing voluntary military service or becoming an adventurer. Achieving merits was the only way for a rogue magician to have access to a prestigious and well-paid job. Lith didn't care for any of that, he just wanted to develop his powers, staying away from the spotlight until he reached 16 years. At that point, he would be considered an adult, and could finally leave Lucia to start exploring the world in search for a solution to his reincarnation problem. If achieving true death turned out to be impossible, he would need to work his way around by either becoming an immortal or binding his soul to the current world. That would be the worst-case scenario, but at least if he died, he would still be reborn with all his magic knowledge and have Solus by his side. Thanks to the money he got from the Count for saving his family, Lith had no need to keep working as a healer. Only when Nana was on house calls or away for personal matters, he would take her place in the home office. Many farmers relied on his presence and discounted prices to afford all the medical care they needed. Nana's fares were too expensive. Just because at the moment he had no need for an extra income, it didn't mean he had already forgotten how bad it was for a family being forced to watch one of their loved ones suffer, the helplessness felt when money dictated the difference between living and barely surviving. Lith would spend most of his mornings exploring the Count's library, in search for tomes to borrow. It was a room twice the size of his house, at least 100 square meters, 109 square yards, big, located in a corner point of the main building. Both the west and north side of the room had huge windows, arranged so that the sun would manage to perfectly light it until dusk. The bookshelves were placed from wall to wall, parallel to each other, and spaced so to avoid ridiculous domino effect in case one fell over, creating 4 corridors. In the center of the room there was a luxurious desk and a couple of armchairs. The books covered all the topics, not just magic, it was the sum of all the knowledge the Count had accumulated through the years. Every time Lith returned home from the library, he would carry over a small chest full of delicacies. Hulya would never let him go away empty-handed. The first book Lith picked up was the Lightning Griffin Academy rule book. Together with useless information, like how submit your application and what were the most common admittance tests, he found an answer to an old question. The academy would last 5 years, and each year the student would need to prove a rising level of mastery of magic. The first year required learning at least 20 Tier 1 spells, the second 130 Tier 2, and so on. So that's why spells are divided into tiers. It's to identify the skill level of the magico compared to the official academic course. Tiers from 1 to 3 were comprised of simple spells with a single effect. Tier 3 was basically the same as a Tier 1, but much more powerful and with higher requirements in terms of talent and skill. From Tier 4, the effects would be much more complicated, like when Lith weaved together different spells with true magic. Tier 4 and 5, based on what he could find, seemed to be greatly similar to true magic. That's probably why most mages never learn the truth about magic. Once they think they have reached the pinnacle, they simply stop asking themselves questions. They put too much attention to the destination and too little on the trip itself. Aside from magic, Lith was also burdened by an annoying personal problem. After seeing his family, the Count was begging him on daily basis to help his daughter get rid of her acne. Please, the debutante ball is when a young noble gets introduced to society as an adult, in the presence of the king's court. It's a very important event that can affect her whole life. It can change not only her chances of finding a good husband, she could also be handpicked by the queen as her personal attendant or even lady-in-waiting. It wasn't that Lith didn't understand, such events had existed on Earth too, more like he didn't care much. For his canons, only one person could keep a secret. 2 were a risk, 3 a whole crowd. Adding a 4th one wasn't much to his liking. Solus, what do you think I should do? The Count has done and is still doing so much for me, a hard pass would be extremely rude on my side. At the same time, I don't know how much I can trust Kayla, being a teenager. I'd say to play it smart. Nana was extremely vague about what you did, and the Count has no idea about the before and after, since he only saw your family after the treatment. Explain to Kayla the dangers you are putting yourself in just by helping her, and after you are sure she has understood, cure only her acne, nothing more. This will minimize the risks. The fact that you saved her life should matter to her. Not to mention that after what her mother put Kayla through, she shouldn't be that naive anymore. She knows what does it mean to live under a sword of Damocles. Following Sola's advice, Lith and the Count explained to her all the possible consequences of breaking his trust, both for Lith and her family. Kayla was a smart girl, so she felt kind of offended by receiving such obvious warnings. First of all, thank you for your trust. First you saved my life, and now you are willing to risk your own safety to save my social life too. This is a debt I will never be able to fully pay back. Second, don't worry for a second about my silence. An advantage is called like that because you are the only one who has it. I would rather cut my tongue than allowing my competition to get their hands on something like that. No offense, Dad, but I know all too well we are just small-time nobles in a backwater county. I need all the help I can, and even with no acne, with our status and riches we are still leagues behind the big noble families. Lith chose to play it safe, making the process last weeks instead of seconds, so that her skin treatment would go unnoticed. They kept Jaden in the dark, and he only noticed the changes when her skin had become smooth and her makeup much lighter. Thanks to Solus he was also able to keep the female staff under his watch, and when not even them noticed anything strange, Lith could finally sigh with relief. By that time, the Count's mansion was back at full staff, and the whole house was busy preparing for a big party. The Count wanted to celebrate two happy events. The first was the annulment, while the second had been something completely unexpected. Based on his prenuptial arrangement, the crown had decided to assign to him all the lands and annuities of the Gishels after their untimely disappearance. Sadly, he wanted Lith to attend, to introduce him to all the neighboring nobility. It's really important for you, I managed to get even Marchioness Miriam Distar to attend. She is for me what I am to all the barons and baronets in the county. Her marquisate encompasses all the region and its counties. If you can, prepare a good gift for her. The only suggestion I can give to you is to prepare something with your hands, or even better, with your magic. Lith was unimpressed and uninterested, but having to live another 8 years in the Lustria county, he could only soldier up and move on. Making a gift for a woman was already hard, making one for someone much richer than him was a challenge. Does she like games? Yes, she loves all kind of strategy games. She is a smart and cunning woman, if there will ever be a war, gods forbid it, she would make an excellent general. And I suppose she is the head of the Distar household, right? Once again correct. Her spouse married into her family, he is like a prince consort, his title as Marquis is purely nominal. Don't tell me you already have something in mind. Lith nodded and left, very sad at the idea of wasting a whole afternoon and evening being a wallflower. His destiny was akin to that of Gerda's corpse, something to show and brag about, before completely forgetting about it and move on next gossip piece. Chapter 45 Challenging Times 2. Count Lark had another dress prepared for Lith, specifically tailored for the occasion. It was very similar to the other day dress he had received in the past, but black in color and with a more elegant cut. It's amazing how similar party dresses are compared to Earth customs. All men wear almost the same dress, the only significant difference is the household crest embroidered on the chest pocket. Instead, the women all wear different types of dresses, varying in colors, neckline, and embroideries. Not to mention the jewelry. Aside from family rings, men wear only monocles or pince-nez. They really resemble a flock of penguins. Lith kept himself from the crowd as long as he could, there was nothing he could gain except awkward memories or curious looks. Marchioness Distar revealed to be really important to Count Lark, to the point that he arranged their meeting privately in his quarters, while the party was taking place in the ballroom. "Thank you so much for coming, dear Marchioness. You have no idea what it means for me having the possibility to share such a happy moment in your company. The pleasure is all mine, dear Lark, I wouldn't miss it for anything in the world." Her lips were smiling, but her eyes didn't. Litha's instinct could tell that she was actually quite bored, and that she was there only because the Count must had persevered relentlessly to make her attend. He knew from experience how stubborn he could be. Based on what the Count had told him, Marchioness Distar should be a woman in her late 30s, but even with the little makeup she wore, it was hard to imagine her a day older than 30. She had a beautiful face with great proportions, eyes brimming with intelligence and curiosity. She wore her waist-long straight hair down, with no hairpin or barrette to adorn them. She had dark brown hair, with shades of blue all over it. It was almost hypnotic to look when she shook her head. Her evening dress was of a pale blue, with no neckline, covering even her shoulders. In contrast to all the other noble dames, the Marchioness wore evening gloves, and there were no gemstones embroidered in her attire. She had clearly chosen a plain dress, hoping to either go unnoticed or leave early. "This is the boy I talked to you about so much." The Count laughed. "He is incredibly skilled, wise beyond his age, and according to Lady Neria, he is blessed by the light." "Really?" The Marchioness didn't believe a word, but ruffled Litha's hair nonetheless. Lith could feel that such gesture of intimacy was out of place, coming from such a grand dame. It also had no warmth at all. It felt more like a dog show judge checking the fur, rather than a caress. Sigh, as predicted, Tranquil has once again wasted my time. The Marchioness thought. It's just another of his childish delusions, finding a talented male mage in such scarcely populated land. I would really love to tell him that the reason why women and magical beasts have colored shades in their hair is the sign of the blessing from the 6 gods of magic. It would save so much of his efforts and my time. Too bad that the Mage Association would make a huge fuss if I did. Those old fogies and their reluctancy to reveal even such an open secret. Everyone in the king's court knows it, be him/her a mage or not. Lith could see she was disappointed, but had no idea why. Eager to go back home and do something actually meaningful, he bowed to her. "My name is Lith of Lucia, your ladyship. I'm glad and honored to make your acquaintance. Please, accept this humble gift. Is not much, but I made it myself." The Marchioness was pleasantly surprised. At least this country bumpkin acts humbly and knows the proper etiquette, instead of being all arrogant like he owns the place, unlike all his predecessors. "Thank you, I'm much obliged." It's what she actually said even before opening the envelope. It turned out to be a square-shaped wood board, with sides about 51 centimeters, 20 inches, long, with 8 columns and rows of black and white alternating colors of wood. After checking it with the Count, Lith couldn't be bothered much finding a proper gift, and went straight plagiarizing the game of chess. The Marchioness' interest was piqued, she had never saw anything like that before. The board was accompanied by the chess pieces and a booklet explaining all the rules. Differences from the common chess game were few but significant. First, the king and queen roles were swapped. Lith had to suck up to an important woman, making the king the game goal was plainly stupid. Also, he renamed the bishops as mages and the pawns as commoners. Everything else was as it was supposed to be. The Marchioness read the rules so fast that Lith thought she was simply skimming, instead she asked him a precise question. Why the commoners can become any chess piece if they reach the end of the board. Although he had considered unlikely, Lith had prepared for this question, giving the answer the usual fortune cookie wisdom that the Count so much liked. Because when someone, even a commoner, completes his journey toward wisdom, life holds endless possibilities. After all, even the king's ancestors at some point have been simple commoners, before rising to power. The Marchioness giggled softly. Well, it seems that at least the part about the wisdom is true. She thought. Fancy a game? Seems really interesting. You could show me the ropes. It would be a nice way to get to know each other better. You can understand a lot about a person based on how he plays, wins, but most importantly how he accepts loss. Such outcome was completely out of his expectations. Lith was taken aback. He knew very little about chess, aside from the rules. He had never liked the game much, he found it to be too long and boring. Why waste time with some pieces of wood, with so many VR games available on Earth? He had learned to play when he was very little, after reading a wonderful book about a chess player, but his experience had been far from pleasant. He was too reckless and impatient, barely able to think one move ahead. Lith found no pleasure or emotion while playing chess. To him it was like a solitaire where you have to wait minutes to turn a single card. Luckily, he was never alone. Solis had fallen in love with the game since she saw it in Litha's memories, viewing all the matches he had in the past and the ones he spectated. Solis, take the wheel. Save me, please. It would be a pleasure, your ladyship. After sitting at a table, the games began. Even from her first game, the Marchioness proved to be incredibly intelligent, cunning, and bold. She was able to think at least 5 moves in advance, always trying to figure out Litha's intentions and weak points. Too bad for her, Lith barely knew what he was doing. He was the perfect straw man for hiding Solis' real plans. He would just move the pieces as she instructed him to. You defeated her in barely 30 moves? Shouldn't you be a little more kind to her? The Marchioness clicked her tongue, asking for a rematch. To a smart woman like that? She would notice and get offended, naive man. Maybe if you went easier on her earlier, she wouldn't notice now. And where's the fun in that? Lith was flabbergasted. This is not a matter of fun. We're sucking up to her, remember? OPPs. My bad. OPPs, my pale A*S. Solis started to slow things down, but after just a few moves the Marchioness showed a displeasured face before toppling her queen. I clearly underestimated you and your game. I need more time to get acquainted with all the possibilities. She extended her hand, and Lith shook it. She had a gentle but firm grip. Lith could feel no hostility from her. Mind if I show it around? I need opponents to get some practice. It's all yours. You can do anything you want with it. After that, Lith left the two nobles discussing between them, all too happy to get away from that torture chamber. After asking Jaden if he was finally allowed to leave, in a polite manner, of course, and getting a no as an answer, Lith was left pondering on what had just transpired. Maybe there is a silver lining in you crushingly defeating that woman. Really? Yes. If we want to avoid being forced to enroll in a magic academy, we could just as well sabotage ourselves a little. We already know that the Count has not the means to ensure our admittance. If we piss off the nobles a little, just enough for them to not back his recommendation, we'll avoid the whole thing without offending the Count. Good idea. Even if indirectly, you have already caused both the Gishel and Trahan households to fall. Probably in the nobles' eyes you already have quite some demerits. You are already halfway there, you're quite good at being disliked. Thanks for the vote of confidence. Lith turned sour. Solis inwardly cursed herself for the slip of the mind, and avoided apologizing. In that moment would only add fuel to the fire. For the first time in years, Lith was actually hurt by those words. His anger silently rose. When he heard someone belittling his endeavor of killing Gerda, he seized the opportunity to set his plan in motion. It was a couple, likely father and son, commenting on the stuffed BYK exposed in a corner of the room. It's not that big, said a chubby middle-aged man that barely managed to reach Gerda's navel with his head. I'm sure you could have killed it too, Frenon. I don't know, Dad. replied the 10-years-old kid that shared a striking resemblance with the man, only younger and thinner. It seems big to me. And look at those fangs and claws. This Lith must be crazy to get near something like this. Bah! Scoffed the man, making his double chin and his waxed brown curls tremble. If you kill it with magic, there is no need to get close. It's just that simple. How can you be less bold than a commoner? I pampered you too much. I beg your pardon. A stone-cold voice reached them from behind. The two turned around, trembling visibly. They had recognized Jaden's voice, the future Count Lark and lord of their lands. Even in his anger, Lith wasn't so reckless, he just ratted them out to his noble friends, leaving the dirty job to them. That was quite a rude remark, Baronet Hogum. Kayla's voice was fierce and loud, resounding through the whole room. Lith was many times her benefactor, and hearing such a blatant lack of respect in her own house was simply too much to bear. Jaden thought the same, but his sister had butted in at the right moment, forcing him to step back momentarily. Ah! 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 There's a misunderstanding. The baronet title was the lowest, getting on the Lark's family black book was beyond bad. Are you implying we are both deaf or just stupid? Did you hear what I did too, dear brother? I heard a nasty remark about one of our honored guests, dear sister. Before things could escalate further, the Marchioness chimed in. There. It's a party, let's try to be friends and not spoiling the mood. Her appearance made all heads turn, the chatter instantly stopped. Besides, it's so simple to separate the wheat from the chaff. What about a little magic challenge? The room roared in an applause. Under the Marchioness' lead, the crowd moved outside. The park was already perfectly lit up, since after dinner the party was supposed to move outside, to enjoy the fresh night breeze while drinking properly aged liquors. She made the two boys stand 20 meters, 22 yards, from each other, before explaining the rules. This will be a friendly match, so it ends on first blood. Only magic is allowed. I want no underhanded tricks, also seriously harming the opponents is prohibited. A mage without control is no different from a violent drunkard. Strangely, the Marchioness said that while looking only at Lith, and that pissed him off even further. So, just because I'm a commoner, she treats me like a barbarian? So much for losing with grace. Such a hypocrite. I'll be the judge. If I say stop, you better stop. Fuel was added to the fire. Both the youths nodded. Lith put his arms behind his back. You know, I really wouldn't be in your shoes. If you win, you prove nothing. You would have just beaten a lowly commoner, like everyone expects you to. But if you lose... Lith paused dramatically, still waiting for the start signal. Wouldn't be terrible, losing in front of all these people, proving to be less talented and bold than a commoner. The young baronet started gulping loudly, turning constantly toward the crowd, suddenly realizing the pressure of the challenge. Begin. When the Marchioness' voice rang out, he was so stiff that he had yet to move, when Lith opened his palm while yelling. Scram! A powerful gust of wind made Baronet Hogum fall on the ground. Lith of Lucia wins. The crowd was surprised, a murmur started spreading like wildfire. Why did she stop the match so suddenly? Everyone asked. The Marchioness helped the boy to get up and brought him closer for them to observe. There was a shallow cut on his left cheek, going from his nose to the ear. Just with chore magic. From that distance. Impressive. That's how he has single-handedly killed a BYK. Lith puffed his chest, his anger subsiding enough for him to avoid further mockery on the expenses of his defeated opponent. A small girl quickly rushed to the Marchioness, making a perfect bow to her while whispering something, her face all smiles and pleasantries. She was so petite to appear ageless to Lith. She could be 8 years or 13 years old, he couldn't tell. She was definitely flat as a board, with gold blonde hair with shades of red. Her dress had gemstones the size of an acorn embroidered into it. The brat must be loaded. Lith thought. Be careful. While the boy was just a yellow core, she has a green one. Solus warned him. Lith inwardly scoffed. Lucky B** starred. Lith, this is Minia Tristarm, daughter of the Viscount Tristarm. Minia, this is Lith from Lucia. Nice to meet you. The girl performed a barely noticeable curtsy. The pleasure is all mine. Lith returned the rudeness, by performing such a small bow that it could be easily confused with him checking if his shoelaces were properly knotted. Minia was really impressed by your feat, and would like to challenge you to a different kind of competition. It would be an honor performing for her grace. My father had tried for so long to get an audience with your ladyship. Obnoxious brat. Lith thought. She has been watching the Marchioness the whole time, speaking like I'm not even here. You are in for a surprise. They moved back into the ballroom, where the servants promptly prepared a small round table. A single candle was standing on its center. This is a magical competition that's really popular within the capital. The girl kept looking at the Marchioness, while she explained the game with a condescending tone. Real mages are not mindless brutes. Real power comes from the mind. Spare me the details and explain the rules. Lith's tone was even more condescending. It's really simple. Minia looked at him for the first time. Each of us picks a color, the one that manages to keep the candle of the chosen color for 10 seconds is the winner. Is it clear? Lith yawned. I'll take the yellow. And I the red, like my hair. Is my favorite color. When the Marchioness gave the start signal, Minia tried her best to turn the candle to red, while Lith was checking his nails' length, yawning from time to time. Soon the 10 count was completed, and he tried to walk away. Wait. I demand a do-over. The girl was bright red from the embarrassment. Why? Everyone asked. Do you realize that keeping control of a flame is much easier than taking it over? Lith could easily see through her allegations. Are you insinuating that by exploiting the natural color of the candle I took control of it before the challenge started, getting an unfair advantage? He laughed. You can understand a lot about a person, based on how she plays, wins, but most importantly how she accepts loss. Lith quoted, looking straight in the Marchioness' eyes. Let's have a do-over, then. This time I'll pick Cyan. Feel free to get a head start. I'll commence my attack only when the flame is completely red, so we'll be even. Agreed. Eager to restore her wounded pride, Minia nodded while she was already turning the candle to a bright red. Can I? When both the Marchioness and Minia nodded, Lith started sending tendrils of mana toward the candle. Slowly but inexorably, many cyan spots appeared inside the flame, taking it over in less than a minute. I yield. Minia didn't wait for the 10 count, the outcome was painfully clear to her. Do you want another do-over? Lith hissed, bending forward, getting really close to her face, his eyes reduced to fiery slits brimming with mana. Lith, your mana is overflowing. Solus warned him. Let it burn. Minia shook her head, before running back to her father. No one dared to challenge him anymore. The rest of the evening was full of chattering and gossiping, but otherwise uneventful. This should be plenty enough to make any academy in the region reject our application. End of Book 1. Chapter 46, A New Beginning. Almost 4 years had passed, and over time many things had changed. 2 years ago, when Lith was still 10 years old, Rena had reached adulthood. She participated to the Spring Maiden contest, winning it by a landslide. Between the clothes from the Count, the makeup from Kayla and the beauty treatment from Lith, she had basically no competition. She has soon started to hang out with several young promising bachelors, before finding the right one. His name was Senton, and he was the son of the blacksmith. After dating for almost a full year, They were ready to marry. In that same year, Tista had reached her growth spurt at the age of 12. She was officially healed from her congenital condition and had started to practice fake magic under Litha's and Nana's guidance. Her mana core had become deep green, and according to Solus, there was still space for it to grow at least up to bright green. Tista was finally able to get out of the house without supervision, starting to make friends with the children of the neighbors. It was too late for her to try to attend to a magic academy. She barely knew the basics of chore magic, but she didn't mind. After being prisoner of her own body for so many years, she had no interest in perpetual challenges. The only thing she really wanted was to enjoy her new life, trying out all the things that had been forbidden to her before. Becoming a magica and inheriting one day Nana's business was already beyond every expectation she ever had. Even Litha's household had deeply transformed. Between his magic, the help from the Count and all the money he was able to earn, the walls were now made entirely of stone, only the floor and the roof were still wooden. He had also built a new bedroom for himself that served as a study too. Lith was getting too old to keep sleeping with his sisters, and had no intention of moving in with Tryon. He demanded his personal space and privacy, and since he was the one paying for it, no one could make any objections. As for Lith himself, he had changed deeply, at least physically. Despite having yet to become 12 years old, he was already 1 meter and 60 centimeters, 5 feet 3 inches, high. His thin and scrawny build was only a memory. Now he had broad shoulders, his muscles were well developed but not ripped, rather cleverly chiseled. He didn't want to stand out nor to carry useless weight. Lith wasn't planning on becoming a soldier, after all. He was plenty content with a far from average build and a body that was able to react instantly, according to his will. His mana core was still cyan, but not deep anymore, halfway through the light cyan that would precede the next evolution. A mana core on the strong end of the spectrum had proven to be much stronger than the previous ones, but at the same time it put a much stronger burden to Litha's body. He had reached a bottleneck that couldn't be overcome with training or study. Only after hitting his growth spurt, his body would become strong enough to allow him to refine further the mana core. Before such event, the use of accumulation would bring to him only pain and no benefits. Accumulation is the breathing technique that allows Lith to absorb the world energy into his mana core, making it grow stronger through expansion and shrinking cycles, with the mana core turning of a lighter color at every cycle. See the end of Chapter 7 and Chapter 9 for more details. Also, since now all of his clothes had the Lark's household crest on either the shoulder or the chest pocket, he made full use of his newfound authority, protecting the village in Nana's absence. For a fee, of course. The only criminals he would take out for free were those with a nice dead or alive bounty on their heads. Lith would strictly deliver them feet first. Now that he was almost 12, the number of spells and the skill level he could reveal had increased exponentially, since now he officially had more than 6 years of magical training. Seeing him fly around or hunting for pelts or bounties had become a common occurrence in the Lucia village. By having 3 healers and 2 protectors, the village kept growing in fame, size, and population. It was only thanks to him that Rena and Senton were able to date each other. Previously, the idea of the son of an artisan marrying the daughter of a humble farmer would have been preposterous. Inside, though, Lith had changed very little. He was still the cynical, mistrustful broken man he had always been, with no real friend or loved one outside his family and Solus. Having to deal with criminals, chasing away profligate boys that molested his sisters and interacting with the nobles, had further rooted in his mind the idea that mankind, even in the New World, was a plague that he had to avoid. His only real confidant was Solus, and despite all her attempts, she had not been able to change his mind, even one bit. He was also in a very bad mood. Damn it, Tier 4 spells are really hard. I can manage to reproduce them with true magic, but I still feel they are somewhat lacking. Either when I cast them with true or fake magic, Something keeps feeling amiss. Yeah. Soulless mind nodded. Maybe is just my impression, but this kind of spells is supposed to hold some deep and profound concept that we are not able to grasp. Maybe, if we had access to tier 5 books. Ifs and buts are just a waste of time. Who would have ever thought that Count Lark wouldn't buy them? He is still dead set to send me to the Lightning Griffin Academy, no matter how many times I repeated I preferred being homeschooled. Well, you knew how stubborn the Count can be. Also, from his point of view, not buying the books kills two birds with one stone. He manages to save a mountain of gold and forces you attending the academy at the same time. During those 4 years, Lith had relentlessly tried to convince the Count that an academy was not good for him, even resorting to use the need to protect his family and the village as a leverage. Bulatin the Count was immovable. Dear Lith, you have a dire need of the academy, and I say this only in your best interest. I cannot stress out how important it is to learn how to properly interact with your peers and establishing the right connections. Not to mention that you have no friend of your age. You need to socialize, fall in love, even. Otherwise you'll grow into a cranky and cynical man. Been there, done that. Solus giggled. Also don't worry for your family. As soon as you enroll, they'll gain a newfound status, and until your graduation the Magic Association will take personal care of them. At that point, not even the most reckless madman would try something funny. Lith had run out of excuses, and could not tell him the truth. He was sick and tired of being looked down by nobles and foreign merchants, and even resorting to violence or intimidation after a while had lost much of its luster. Lith just wanted to be left in peace and treated with respect, like any normal human being. He didn't know how long he could suffer the contempt and abuse from his so-called peers at the academy, before shoving their high and mighty attitude up their throat, after taking detour through their ses. The idea of not being able to practice true magic, spirit magic, and fusion magic was enough to give him a big headache. In an academy he would be crippled, losing all of his advantages to not blow his cover. It was a lose-lose situation. Litha's mood was made even worse by the thought of Rena moving out the household. After what happened to Carl, he had developed an obsessive-compulsive need to know where everyone was at any given time. He needed to feel that everything was under his control to be in peace with himself. If you really love them, you have to let them go. Solus tried to console him. After all, academy or not, when you reach 16 years and leave the house, what are you going to do? Stuff them and store them in the pocket dimension? You need to learn to let go and focus on what's really important for you. If you really wanted to make them your puppets, you wouldn't have cured Tista. Her illness was the perfect leash, yet you willingly choose to free her. They are not Carl. The whole world is not filled with trash like the one that killed him. Litha's mind recognized the truth in her words, but his heart refused to. It would keep screaming F***ck the world. They are mine. 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 Is this what a father feels when his children leave the nest? He couldn't avoid noticing that even Raz, despite all the smiles and happiness he showed, was actually quite depressed losing his eldest daughter. If I'm like this with adults, I'm afraid to discover what I would become if children were involved. It seems I am destined to be single for life. Now that Lith was 11 years and a half, he had reached the minimum age requirement to apply for a scholarship at the Lightning Griffin Academy. Count Lark was waiting for him at his manor, from where they would travel to their destination by stagecoach. According to the Count, flying in the vicinity of any building owned by the Mage Association was strictly forbidden. Even to get in the vicinity was needed a special pass and to have set up an appointment through the proper channels. The academy wasn't that far, but using a stagecoach would require several hours of boredom. While looking through the window, Lith could only hope that all those years of preparations and self-sabotaging would pay off. Being actually accepted in such an institution, away from home, would be the beginning of his worst nightmare. Chapter 47 Odd Developments. It was in moments like that that Lith felt how heavy a bottleneck was. Normally, in such a situation, he would use accumulation, turning a downtime into a training session while also studying how his body was developing. But now that option was unavailable, and being stuck in such state for almost a year, he knew his body inside out, to the point of memorizing where every impurity was located. After half an hour, he was about to fall asleep. Hope the Count doesn't mind me snoring a little. Lith, why don't we open Nana's goodbye gift? I'm really curious. Solus said. I'm not. That stingy old hag just gave me a piece of paper. I bet it's a list of souvenirs she wants me to buy for her. A small friendly bet was better than doing nothing, so he took out the small envelope and read its content. Lith had lost the bet. It was a brief letter. Now that you are going to a magic academy, away from the prying eyes of your parents, you deserve to know the truth. Your magic holds a forbidden spell that I never taught you. Now you are old enough to know. It followed a short but precise description on how to use darkness magic on himself to avoid unwanted consequences from the intimacy with girls. It was a birth control spell. The letter closed with a "Remember to always be a gentleman and have fun. You'll thank me later. With love, Nana." What a dirty old lady. I'm not even 12. Lith couldn't stop from laughing out loud. The idea of Nana being the one worrying about his sex life was hilarious. It's this about something Lady Neria wrote? An anecdote? Can I see it too? The Count was very curious. Seeing Lith laugh was a rare occurrence. After reading the message, Count Lark became purple from embarrassment. The scene made Lith laugh even louder. Oh my, the Count is such a softie. Getting flustered by such stupid thing. Sometimes he seems straight out of a manga. Lith, this is no laughing matter. The Count said. I appreciate Lady Neria's concern, but I still find it ill-timed and vulgarly expressed. The matters of the heart should be treated with more tact, especially with someone young as you are. Lith couldn't help but renew his laughter. He really called it matters of the heart. It's just sex, man. The light mood didn't last long. The long trip soon made both the men fall asleep. When the coachman woke them, they were already arrived. The sight of the Lightning Griffin Academy was truly impressive. The building itself seemed an enormous castle, straight from the wet dreams of a medieval engineer. Yet it was impossible to see it clearly, they were still too far. The academy was in the center of a huge forest that extended in all directions as far as the eye could see. That explains why it's so distant from populated areas, is basically a county of its own. The forest may even have an extension superior to the Tron Woods. Lith thought. Why do we stop here? We are still very far. How are we supposed to reach the academy? The Count was excited like a kid in a candy store. Don't worry and follow me. He brought Lith to a small brick house on the edge of the forest, where two men were sipping tea while idly chatting. The Count introduced himself and showed them their permits. The man that was now holding the papers whispered a few words. The ink rearranged itself, coming out of the sheet and forming some kind of magic circle on the ground. Even the permits are a magical item. Lith was shocked. I sensed some mana coming from them, but I supposed it was just some kind of magical seal of authenticity, not something this complex. Solus explained. **T. We are completely in the dark about magical items, and there's no mention of it in any book we read so far. Either we find a way to correct this situation, or our travels will be much more difficult in the future. Following the man's instructions, Lith and the Count stepped inside the circle, that instantly became a translucent yellow sphere. It gently rose up in the air, before starting to fly at breakneck speed toward the castle. Despite it was moving faster than Lith ever did before, they felt no different than standing on the ground. This thing is like gyro-stabilized. What a brilliant idea. For the first time Lith was almost regretting his choice. Almost. The trip was short, but Lith still managed to see many huge magical beasts running inside the forest. They even almost collided with an eagle the size of a Piper aircraft. Its eyes were full of scorn, shrieking at them something that sounded a reprimand. "Is it me, or there are only magical beasts in there?" Lith asked the Count, who nodded. "Yes, magical beasts and monsters, of course. They'll explain everything to you once you enroll." The Count had a fatherly tone, but Lith could clearly hear a hint of condescension. "I told you so." Like. The sphere landed on a balcony before dissipating. A 20-year-something girl wearing a magician robe was waiting for them. She guided them through magical escalators and corridors, before leaving them into the headmistress' antechamber. She had talked via a small communicator amulet the whole time, giving orders about menial duties. In Litha's experience, that meant bad news. Whenever he had a job interview, the secretary attitude towards the applicants was a tell about how the company treated his employees and what were their expectations about a candidate. She had ignored them the whole time, not giving them a tour or an explanation about any of the magical marvels they had encountered. For someone who wanted to be rejected, though, it was good news. The Count was too mesmerized to notice. His eyes were moving to every single piece of furniture, his mouth agape in admiration. The room itself was a prodigy. Despite no visible source of light, be it windows, torches, or light stones, every nook and cranny were lighted as the morning sun was shining above their heads. "What do you think of this?" the Count asked as a rhetorical question, expecting Lith to show an enthusiasm equal if not superior to his. "Honestly, I find it pretentious and stuck up. Everything in the room feels like his master is looking down on us, trying to intimidate the guest and put him in his place." "Really?" The Count's dream bubble popped up abruptly. "Yeah. I mean, little splendor is fine, but this? It's too much." He pointed at the gold decoration that kept shifting to silver and platinum, and at the gemstones embroidered at every corner, like shining eyes staring at them with contempt. "Also, how do you explain otherwise that girl rude attitude? She barely looked at us at all." "Oh dear." The Count gulped. "Now that you point that out, this room resembles very much the king's antechamber for the unwanted guests." "Is there such thing?" Lith was curious. "Yes, is kind of an open secret. The king's room has more than one waiting room, depending on how much he cares about the visitor. The one for the unwanted guests is filled with tacky stuff like this, to remember the visitor the crown's power. It's also filled with painting depicting the previous kings and queens slaying rebellious nobles or mages. Depends on whom he wants to pressure. Like these ones." Lith pointed to many magical paintings, all of them were short movies, showing how the Mage Association got rid of entire families of unruly nobles throughout history. The event depicted would go to the point of showing the bloodshed, the mansion set aflame, before starting to tell their story back from the beginning. "Precisely." The Count swallowed loudly. Expecting to have to wait for hours, Lith made himself comfortable, trying to get asleep again. He wasn't disappointed. When the Count woke him up, he could see from his face that he had quite some pent-up stress. He had waited patiently for long enough to get the message. "Don't say a word. If we want to salvage this thing, we need tact and diplomacy. Leave everything to me," Count Lark said with barely a whisper. The headmistress' office was much less tacky than her antechamber, resembling very much a common principal office from Earth. She was a woman at least as old as Nana, but time had been kinder to her. Her face was full of wrinkles, but her eyes were full of energy and life. Unlike Nana, she was ready to live a long life and stood straight as a string. Her hair was almost completely gray, only some shade of yellow still remained. She wore a robe with the colors of her academy. It was of a light blue, while all the decorations were of a bright yellow, most likely gold. The way its fabric had been woven, made it seem like every movement of the headmistress was the wind moving through the sky, while the gold embroidered appeared and disappeared like sudden lightnings. She had only smiles and nice words, but Litha's instinct could sense no warmth in her. "Dear Count, we haven't met for too long." She extended her hand to him. "You are too kind. It's only my fault that I can't bring you enough promising youths." The Count's poker face was impeccable. All traces of stress and anxiety had disappeared. His words were calm and gentle, like meeting a long-lost sister. "Please, have a seat. Sorry for the long wait, but as you know this is the busiest time of the year." The apology sounded fake, like a $3 bill. "Do not apologize, I completely understand. Now, sorry if I go straight to business, I do not want to waste any more of your precious time." The Count took out a folder that contained a chronicle of all feats Lith had accomplished, together with his official merits count. The headmistress pushed the folder back. "No need. We always do a full background check on every applicant. I must say that you brought me a really interesting fellow." This time it was Lith's turn to gulp loudly, cold sweat going down his spine. "What the heck did I do wrong?" She took out a folder of her own, much thicker than the previous one. "I can see that this young man, Lith, has earned a lot of merits by healing the poor and by getting rid of many of the menaces that threatened your county. Did you know that the criminal underworld has nicknamed him Scourge? Beats me how the heck my beast title reached their ears. How can delinquents and magical beasts view me in the same way?" Lith thought. "It seems that he likes his bounties dead as a doornail, and that's good. Being merciful with the scum of earth can only bite you in the back, sooner or later." He also had quite a number of magical challenges with some noble youths. "And that's bad, right?" Lith clenched his fist, full of expectation. "That's good too. A true mage must not fear to defend himself or his name. In our business, talent and power are more important than etiquette. Not to mention that those who have not the skill, should not fly too close to the sun and then complain about getting burned." Lith felt like the earth was collapsing under his feet. "So instead of sabotage, I self-promoted all this time. F*** me sideways. But suddenly Litha's hopes revived, like a phoenix risen from its ashes. "Sadly, I must say that he doesn't meet the requirements for a scholarship. I'm really sorry. F***yes. I forgive you, deceiving B***tch. I did it, and that's what matters." The Count turned pale as a ghost. "May I know why?" "Talent, skill, heart. I dare to say he is the best one I ever brought here so far." His voice was broken. Lith felt bad for the poor man. "Of course you can, you deserve to know. You see, the real problem lies not in your protege, but rather in his mentor." "Excuse me." Blood flushed back in the Count's face. "Neria is a fallen mage, akin to a disowned son of the Academy, if not of the whole Mage Association. Like for nobles is forbidden to help a relinquished of their own, the same stands for us, or at least for me. She has brought shame to the institution, and up to this very day she keeps meddling with us. Not to mention that even if indirectly, Lith has been involved in the purge of 2 noble households. As a mage, I can't stress enough how despicable I find dragging the Mage Association into every single petty squabble. It's an abuse of power, and I want to send a message to all the rogue mages out there by rejecting her disciple. You can try bringing him to other academies, but I think their answer will be the same." "What?" The Count was now bright red, his eyes almost popping out from the rage. "Lady Neria has protected and helped Lustria County for years, while everyone else did nothing. This young man saved my life, my family. He did what he did only for self-preservation, and you are telling me that you are willing to ruin his life for your own petty revenge? For politics? How dare you speak to me like that in my office?" The headmistress jumped up from her armchair, her eyes glowing with power. "I dare. I double dare and call this bullsh**t. Lith never thought the Count to be such a brave fighter. You are just sacrificing a mage, and a powerful one, for your own political gain. Lith, let's go. The air stinks in here. Before going out the door, the Count turned back, yelling. This doesn't end here. I'll let everyone know how the lightning griffin has stooped. You'll never get again a single copper coin from my county or any of my retainers. And by the way, he is the inventor of the chessboard on your desk. The door slammed behind them, without giving her the opportunity to rebuke. Man, seriously. So much for tact and diplomacy. You are a small cog in a big machine. Your threats are nothing but wishful thinking. Lith's happiness was clouded by the worries about the consequences that the Count's fit of rage could have on both his homeland and his friend. Count Lark had fought for him fiercely, and that was something Lith would never forget. Chapter 48 Helpless Rage. The Count was true to his word, and the news about what happened in the Lightning Griffin Academy spread like wildfire in Lustria County. The villagers of Lucia and its outskirts were simply outraged. Life was already hard as it was, the idea that even if talented a commoner had to suffer from political plays was a slap in the face of all their hopes and dreams. Despite her attitude, Nana was a savior to most of them, to the point of considering her part of their own family. Countless people knew all too well that without her, too many babies would have never been safely delivered. Seeing their benefactor treated as a plague, tainting everything she touched, was too much to bear. The same thing applied to those few noble families she associated with for her personal affairs. Hundreds of letters were sent to Count Lark, who in turn forwarded them to the king's court. Now that he had regained his cool, he realized how of little importance was his county and funding to such a large institution like an academy. Even if coupled by so many letters, his official complaint about the headmistress violating the rules to pursue her political agenda, was bound to rise little if no interest in the court. He sent it anyway. Surrendering to fate without even attempting to fight was something that he would have regretted his whole life. Litha's family was as furious as helpless, cursing the academy for its unfairness and themselves for their impotence. Lith was the less disappointed one from such turn of the events. One way or another his plan worked, and that was good. On the other hand, though, that trip to the academy had been an eye-opener about how ignorant he was about the new world and how fake magic had developed through the centuries. Solus had confirmed to him that while the rude secretary had a deep cyan mana core, the headmistress had a fully developed blue one. Lith had always felt so proud being one of the only two cyan core holders of the county, but not anymore. He started regretting not having the possibility to at least check the other students and personnel of the academy, even if just to collect data about what was the average power level in the outside world. Now that he was forced to follow his original plan, he had discovered so many unexpected flaws in it. The first and most annoying one was being forced to rot for another 4 years in Lustria County, where his talent was doomed to stagnate. On their way back, the Count had confessed to him that rather not wanting to purchase Tier 5 books, it was actually impossible for him. It wasn't only a matter of price, that would be enormous anyway, but he lacked the connections to obtain them. He had already acquired all the books he could, which included only those that the Mage Association was willing to share with the general public. To get more he would need either a stroke of luck or the association had to change its rules. Both the events were highly unlikely. That meant that he was stuck with Tier 4 spells that he had learned without understanding their purpose. It was frustrating for him, like memorizing a mathematical equation just to pass a calculus exam, but knowing that you had been incapable to comprehend the underlying meaning of it. And during all those years of boredom, all the other magicians in the world would continue their education, shaving off 4 years of magical practice from the advantage he held. Lith was still better than his peers because while they started their studies at 6 years of age or later, he had already started as a newborn. But soon all his hard work, the sacrifices, the hunger, would all turn out to be a fool's errand. The second flaw was that he had completely underestimated the importance and distribution of magical items. He hadn't seen much, but it had been plenty enough to give him an itch in his head he could not scratch. If it was possible to create such useful items with fake magic, then with true magic he would likely be able to wield and create superior version of those items, getting an even upper hand against other magicians. Now, instead, he had no idea how they worked or how to acquire them. With enough knowledge, it could be even possible to help Solus regain her powers faster, maybe even reforge her or something. *CK, I'm not just a frog in the well. I am a frog in a well in the middle of nowhere. Considering everything I saw in less than an hour, is not surprising at all that true magic is still a secret. A fully magically equipped fake mage could probably fight with me on equal footing. I have no idea of the scope and availability of magical items. Even if somehow, I manage to keep expanding my knowledge, my future travels are bound to be much more difficult than I had previously anticipated. The only silver lining is that outside the biggest families, they should not be too much common, and that I managed to avoid 5 full years of being a bullied cripple. But before calling myself lucky, I need more information. I am starting to suspect that I underestimated my circumstances a lot. Nana and Lark have a lot of explaining to do. Lith took flight and moved towards Nana's house. The Count was just a magic enthusiast, after all, while she had actually attended to one of the 6 big academies, so she was bound to have much more inside knowledge. At his arrival, he found out that Count Lark was there too, and had sent some villagers searching for Lith. Both of his patrons wanted to speak to him. Since the waiting room was filled with patients, Lith helped Nana and Tista clear the queue so that Nana could leave Tista in charge and take a break for their talk. Once inside Nana's living quarters, the 3 of them sat around her kitchen table. First of all, Lith, allow me to apologize. I never expected that old hag of Linnea to be willing to escalate our enmity to the next level. Making you pay for my mistakes, whether true or alleged, is beyond unfair. But aside from that, from what I hear from Tista, you are taking the situation all too well. You still don't understand how wronged you have been, and that's also my fault. I stupidly respected the academy rules and kept its open secrets. But since they are playing dirty and Lark is still willing to submit to apply in your stead for the remaining 5 big academies, I need to play dirty too and violate my oath. If you want to have even a 1% chance of being admitted, you need to give your 100%, if not more. Enough with this crappy whatever attitude of yours. There's a lot at stake, and we need you to take this seriously. Lith knitted his eyebrows. What oath? What secrets? What are you talking about? I read that stupid academy pamphlet countless times. Sure, unless some miracle happens, I will not get to study tier 5 spells, but that's it. I can still become a member of the Mage Association. To be honest, the idea of spending 5 years locked up with arrogant rich kids trying to stab me in the back is far from alluring. I can easily imagine what they would put me through, day after day. So, if it amounts to just some books, then thanks but no thanks. Nana shook her head. It's so much more than just books. You see, you are right about the being looked down upon and the daily bullying. The problem is that you are wrong about everything else. In your case, just like me, you wouldn't need 5 years, just 2. How, exactly? 2 years were still a long period of time, but much more manageable than 5, he had to concede her that much. The first 3 years cover the basics of magic. They teach things like the importance of accuracy in hand signs, accents, that kind of stuff. Unlike you, many kids have to learn etiquette, history, geography, all kind of topics, not just how to read and write. Otherwise they would be an embarrassment for their parents. In the court life, they must also learn how to ride a horse, swordsmanship, playing an instrument, everything their parents need to brag about during social events. That of course takes time. Time that they cannot dedicate to the magical arts, hence needing to study the basics of the basics, even chore magic. You don't expect a young duke doing chores, do you? Those like us, instead, need to go to the academy only for the last 2 years, and the endless benefits it brings. At the words endless benefits, Litha's mouth was watering, his mind starting to second-guess his decisions so far. What kind of benefits? Have you ever thought why even the rich and the noble send their kids there? If it was just about books, many students would rather avoid all the competition, just like you, and study in the safety of their homes. What makes entering in one of the 6 big academies so alluring are the 3 benefits that only them can grant. The access to all kind of spell books, the possibility to take one or more specialization courses, and even more importantly the free access to magical items. Lith's mouth was agape from the shock. Nana used his uncharacteristic silence to strike the iron while it was still hot. No matter what the tier, there are countless spells out there. Those you have studied here and at Lark's house are simply those that the Mage Association deems so common to be released to the public. All the best spells, especially from Tier 4 and 5, are strictly controlled, and getting hold of even a sliver of knowledge is incredibly hard. Only in a great academy you have free access to every topic, without restrictions, allowing you to build a great grimoire even before you set your foot out of the door. If you get admitted to the 4th year, everything of Tier 4 or below will be yours to take. What about the specializations? That's complex to explain. Let me make you a simple example. You are a healer, right? Should you choose to become a master healer, not only you would be taught spells that even allow to regrow lost limbs, but most importantly, the secrets on how to more easily create your own light spells. The same applies to every specialization. What's your specialization? Lith asked. I'm a war mage. Nana puffed her chest with pride. I was taught the secrets behind air magic, and back in the day I could have wiped out whole battalions all by myself. Lightning hasn't many applications, but when it comes to destruction, is second to none. But now let's get down to the juicy part, the one that I still regret the most. The possibility to have access to a myriad of magical items. Chapter 49 Doubts and Regrets. Litha's interest was really piqued, so he let Nana continue, keeping his questions for later. Based on how a student performs, she is able to gain or lose points. Individual points or group points. Lith felt so dumb. He had not even finished his previous thought, that he already had been forced to contradict himself. I swear, if there's some kind of retarded household competition, I'll take back every second guess I had about my choice. Nana raised her eyebrows in disbelief. Do you even remember what did I tell you the last time about the academies and their students? Should you put a juicy slab of meat in front of ferocious hungry beasts, do you expect them to cooperate for it? No. They would rather eat each other heart out. Of course the point system is individual. It's very similar to the merit system, but instead of gaining credit from the kingdom, you gain it from the school itself. The points are the only currency allowed inside the academy, and with them you can afford lots of things. Magical potions, enchanted items, and even rare ingredients for you experiments. Obviously, the higher the value, the higher the price. From the long pause, Lith assumed that she had finished and was waiting for his questions. What are magical potions? It's the first time I hear about them. Magic potions are like special spells in a vial. The most basic are alike to healing spells, but between the infirmary and the fact that everyone knows light magic, they are rarely purchased. The more precious are those that allow the user to become temporarily faster, stronger, or even harden her skin if she suspects she will be forced to a melee fight. What about mana potions? Mana what? Isn't there any kind of potion to quickly restore one's mana? Kid, knowledge is shared on voluntary basis. If any master potionist ever discovered something like that, he would keep it for himself. At least that's what I would do. Lith was underwhelmed. Potions seemed a poor imitation of his fusion magic. Not only they are consumable items, but you even have to waste your time bringing them around and replenishing your supply when needed. Plus, Fake mages don't even have something like invigoration. The only good thing about potions is that I can pretend to use them while I use fusion magic instead. Aside from that, they are not very interesting. And invigoration is the breathing technique that allows Lith to quickly regain mana and stamina, to the point that he is able to go on for months without needing to sleep. The longer he uses it, the shorter its effects last. The only way to reset its effects is to actually sleep. See Chapter 8 for more details. I understand, is what he actually said out loud. What kind of magical items can be purchased? Every academy has at least 10 Forge Masters residents. They act as both teachers and researchers in the magical field. They usually put out for sale their lesser works, but they can even bring out high-grade magical items, when the academy wants to stir up a rat race, like right before the final exams. The most useful items I had were a dimensional amulet and rings from tier 1 to 3. The dimensional amulet allowed me to bring around whatever I needed without suffering its weight, while the rings were able to store spells of the same tier, allowing for an instant cast. Lith didn't miss the strict use of the past tense while referring to her possessions. He felt sorry for her, but instead of hyping him, her speech was having the opposite effect. A dimensional amulet? Is it some kind of magical storage item? He played dumb. Nana nodded. Brilliant as usual. Yes, dimensional rings and amulets can store anything inanimate up to a fixed volume of space, regardless of the weight. The lowest class has only a few cubic meters available, the highest class can store even 50 cubic meters, 65 cubic yards. The size of a whole small house. The underwhelming feeling was getting deeper. Solus, how much can our pocket dimension store? At the moment the storage can hold thrice as much, the so-called highest class, and is still expanding. The library space, or Soluspedia, as you call it, is now around 30 cubic meters, 39 square yards, big. And it's also expanding. Litha's poker face was good, but not that good. Nana could see that he wasn't impressed at all. What's with that face? Do you understand or not that whatever you get during your studies, you get to keep it once you graduate? Have you any idea how difficult and expensive it is to purchase even the lowest magical item? Lith closed his eyes while rubbing his forehead. How can I even pretend to be interested in something that I already have or I can do better? Sure, those things would help me greatly keeping hidden my true magic. Whenever I employ an instant cast, I could use the rings as a cover. But that's it? Being an expert liar, Lith knew what his limits were. So, he changed topic. The Forge Master's job seems really interesting. Is it possible to specialize in such field? Does one need to also be a blacksmith to become a Forge Master? Yes, it's among the available choices. And no, blacksmithing is not required. A Forge Master does not create anything, he just imbues objects with magical properties, be it a ring, an amulet, a chair, or even a day dress. They can't possibly master all the craftsman jobs. Most of them prefer to just learn the basic of their favorite trade, though. So, a Forge Master specialized in rings will know something about goldsmithing, and so on. That's really interesting. And for once Lith wasn't just pretending. Out of the 3 topics, the only ones that really interested him were the books and the specialization. With an endless supply of knowledge, he could easily recreate or invent all kinds of spell with true magic. But that was still something that he could figure out on his own, with time and experience. Becoming a Forge Master, instead, would be a priceless treasure for him. Lith had no knowledge about such arts, hence he could never grasp even the basics without an external help. But once he had uncovered the underlying principles of Forge Mastering, coupling them with true magic and the Academy's library, he would be able to unlock infinite possibilities. Just the ideas about magical items that came to him on the spot were enough to give him an adrenaline rush. But when his excitement was at his peak, a sudden thought sent chills down his spine. Before getting my hopes up, can you explain to me how one does get points? There is no such a thing about daily challenges between students, tournaments, or something, right? Nana laughed her s off. That's such an idiotic idea. Not even the wildest rumors would go that far. Otherwise they would be called magic graveyards instead of academies. There's already enough violence going around as it is. If any headmaster started to reward students for their behavior, only a dozen mages would graduate each year, and no one would make their children enroll. A war battlefield would be much safer. Lith could sigh with relief. One of his biggest worries had just faded away. Points are earned mostly through how a student performs in class and during practical exercises. Any feat that benefits the academy, like sharing personal spells, gives additional points. But the real motherlode are the quarterly exams and the finals. All points can be converted anytime, even after graduating successfully. That's why there is so much competition for the top spots. Beware, thought. Even if discipline won't give you any extra point, it can easily make you lose a lot of them. Aside from failing tests repeatedly, is the only way to lower your score. If it goes to negative, you'll be forced to compensate by giving back everything you might have already bought. That's how I lost everything I had. Nana sighed, her voice filled with sadness and regret, tormenting her neck where probably her dimensional amulet used to be. Count Lark intervened, explaining their reason to hide such things from him. We didn't tell you any of this before, to not put you under any more stress and to not raise your expectations about your future too much, in case of failure. Most of the applicants get rejected. In the past, when such knowledge was publicly available, there have been countless suicides among the youths that either couldn't bear the pressure or handle the failure. Especially for those of humble origin, being admitted in a magic academy is the only way to escape their destiny. To a lesser extent, the same could be said for nobles and merchants' sons that are not in the line of succession. I can see that happening. But honestly, I don't see the point in telling me all this. It's not like I got rejected for lack of trying. He lied. What do you expect me to do? Travel through all the county looking for magical beasts? Cause disasters just to be able to solve them? Honestly, I don't think there is any amount of merits that could change my situation. The Count shook his head. We don't expect you to do anything but your best. You have spent years trying to dissuade me to not send you to the academy, and don't think that I didn't notice your total lack of enthusiasm during our trip. You acted the whole time like it was all about someone else, someone you didn't care about. You didn't stand up for yourself, you only wanted to get out of that room. Well, maybe you are right. But maybe I just wanted to avoid the headmistress killing you on the spot. Also, it was you telling me to shut up. It would have been beyond stupid adding oil to the fire. Lith wasn't lying. In that moment, when he had saw the headmistress' eyes overloading with mana, he had been seriously worried about the Lark's family destiny, and had decided to drag the Count away as soon as possible. Point taken. You are right. Count Lark sat down with a depressed face. Bottom line, we still have a few cards to play. Most likely, nothing will come out of them. But if by any chance we succeed, we need you to do more than sit on the sidelines. That's the point. Part 5 of the series ends here. If you enjoyed it, please give us a like and subscribe so we can be motivated to make even better videos in the future.